Hi everybody, so I think number 30 in the Ferling studies, this is from the Southern Music Edition. Obviously we have a couple of challenges. One is the speed that KMEA marked is quite fast. So what I would suggest first is to take it only at a speed that you can actually play it comfortably with all of the accurate notes and accurate articulations and dynamics. So if 112 is too fast, absolutely take it slower. If you're taking it slower though, you're going to probably have to put some more breaths in. And so let's talk about a few saxophone things, and I'll go through them real quick. So we'll back up a step just as far as all of the ideas in the saxophone. Number one are hands. So I like to think of dropping my right hand like this and lifting it up with a little bit of curve that it has naturally in the fingers like this. And then I find the keys like this. And I actually have the same thing with the left hand. Drop it, have a curve, and bring it up to the pearls of the saxophone. I have a slight diagonal like this and a very, very slight diagonal like this, rather than going straight perpendicular into the instrument. And that way I have a little more flexibility with these side keys like this, the upper notes, and also I can access these keys here. So that's hand position. Make sure that your neck strap allows you to pull to the mouthpiece to just fall into your mouth like this. So you don't want to be leaning towards the mouthpiece. Next, I would say that let's talk a little bit about embouchure and how to form a saxophone embouchure. And so one of the things I like to think about is the letter V. And if I say the beginning of the letter V, like this, a little bit of my lower lip inside covers my lower teeth. If I say, let's roll our lower lip over our teeth, we often get too much. So the saxophone embouchure just needs a little bit of lip to be over the lower teeth. And another way to achieve that, besides saying the letter V, is to just let the saxophone fall in the mouth like this and sort of receive it with the lips. Now, the V allows that cushion to happen. I would say that once you get that formed, V, most of all of this, the curve in the chin that's natural should still be there. We don't want to bunch our chin up like this. We don't want to over tighten our corners, although you'll find that if you do pay attention to your corners and have them a little bit engaged, I like to use a less strong word than tighten, engage the corners as well. Let them not be sort of just floppy like this. Then when the reed sits on the center of the lip, all of this acts as a sort of shelf and lets the reed fully vibrate across. I actually often also think of my upper lip wrapping over the top of the mouthpiece rather than just ignoring how my upper lip feels. My top teeth should be resting on top of the mouthpiece, but not biting into the mouthpiece. So again, V, let the mouthpiece pull the neck strap up so you're standing with good posture. When you actually start to blow air, think of this. I like to think of this as a big beach ball, and this is a big beach ball. So fill the bottom one up first. And when I fill up my lower beach ball first, and I go to blow, I like to think of this securing the air, so the only place the air is coming out is through the mouthpiece, into the mouthpiece. When I do that though, I also sort of subconsciously and consciously remind myself to not press my top teeth down into the mouthpiece. So you're going to have to keep, and this is where it's a little bit sort of semantics about the corners. We don't want the air to be leaking out the sides. We do need enough pressure or tension of the lips all the way around to allow the air to not leak out. So what we need to do is keep a certain amount of tension to do that. But when I'm blowing my air, I actually often try to let the air really create the sound, which means my top teeth are just really resting with ever so slight pressure on the mouthpiece to keep it stable in my mouth. And that allows the full vibration of the reed. Okay, so that's a lot of talk about embouchure. Let's talk about articulation. So essentially, we're going to have the first fundamental part of articulation is our air. We need to tank up with a good amount of air, not overly, but just a good reasonable amount so that when you're playing a phrase, you have a little bit of reserve left over. So when you finish the phrase, you're not completely out of breath. I use the tip of my tongue, and let's define the tip as where my taste buds end at the tip of my tongue, or just above, in fact, the tip of the tongue. I think of that just above or under here, the tip of the reed. Now, there are times when I'm playing the saxophone where I feel, particularly on alto, that I am almost touching tip to tip straight on, but not really. It's really just under the tip. So you can sort of just say tip to tip, tip of the tongue to the tip of the reed, but in actuality, it's just above the tip, the front of the tongue. So right above the actual tip of the tongue and just under what the tip of the reed is. So my multi-step process that I think about, and I do think about this, is tongue on the reed first. Actually, first take in your air, tongue on the reed. Now, when you have your air in and your tongue is on the reed, blow, and nothing should come out because you have your reed closed off by your tongue. Then gently release the tongue and let the sound happen because the reed is vibrating now, and then gently put it back. And that gently is really important. So if I play a concert A or an F sharp, I first take my breath, I put my tongue on the reed, and I blow, but nothing comes out. But now when I gently remove my tongue, and a good exercise is to put a metronome on, say, maybe 60 and just practice quarter notes. So I could put it on 60 now for you. I'll turn the metronome on here. And if I put quarters, eighths, triplets, and 16th notes, and so I'm practicing really returning my tongue quickly to the reed. In this piece, even if you're playing at a lot slower tempo, you can make those notes sound short, and they're going to kind of automatically, hopefully, sound short because you're going to the next note so quickly. So in a slower piece where there's more space between notes, we might have to actually really intentionally make notes shorter. But here, I'll give you an example. Say in the first bar, when we have repeated Bs, even if you're going at a little bit of a slower tempo. Oh, and I also wanted to remind us that we need to be blowing a steady air. We don't want to be puffing our throat and re-breathing for each articulated note. We don't want to be doing that. So one breath, light tongue on and off the reed as if it's, and in this piece, again, to talk about the short notes, there are dots on staccato notes. There are dots on the notes, it means to play them short. It depends on your speed. So if we go a little bit faster, what we're going to have is just the tongue sort of bouncing on the reed. And the faster I tongue, I find the lighter my pressure is on the reed. So, and it could sound kind of a little bit legato, but if I get too hard with the pressure of my tongue, then it sounds a little bit too labored. Okay, so articulation, we talked about. Let's talk about articulation when you're moving to different notes, because there's a little bit of coordination involved in this. So in a slow motion way, and I got this from Leon Rushinoff, masterclass clarinet person, famous clarinet professor and teacher in New York City, we're going to prepare our fingers. So we're going to play a note, and then we're going to snap to the next note with our movement of our finger, and that prepares us for the next note. So for instance, in the second measure, I'll start on the high B. I'm doing in slow motion, like I said, is play the note. As soon as I return my tongue to the reed, or to stop the note, boom, my finger goes down to the next note in preparation for the next note. So what I would say is, even if our tendency is to want to practice these things really quickly, or the tempo fast too quickly, slow it down and just practice the action of getting the tongue coordinated with the finger and the finger preparation. The large leaps, like in bar 3, I focus in on my low note on these. And oftentimes, if I'm blowing my air, my upper note will come out a little easier. So one technique to do this is just start with your lower notes and get the voicing feeling good. And again, I'll just remind you what's going on in my mind. I'm really focusing in on my air and not my pressure of my teeth on my top of my mouthpiece. I don't know why that's so important, but it does seem to just let us really focus in on the air and let the sound be as sort of flexible as it can be. A second way we can practice these large leaps, aside from just getting familiar with the voicing of the low notes, is to practice 2-note groups of the low and the high, and then we can reverse that. So for instance, in bar 3, on the first 2 notes, and let's remind ourselves that the beginning of that note, the F sharp, the first note, what I like to do is really prepare it first. So my tongue is on the reed, my air is all set, my tongue's on the reed, and I'm blowing air, and then I decide, after all that's done, take my tongue off and make the F sharp happen. So sometimes we'll put the instrument in our mouth, take the breath, and put our tongue on the reed and release it all kind of almost simultaneously. And what I'm saying is, get all that to happen first before the F sharp sounds. So for instance, again, so I'm separating the notes out. I'm feeling where the note starts, where it ends, light tongue pressure, nice steady air. And I'm also, let's use the word voicing, I'm feeling where the voicing is, or the shape of each note. So the F sharp has a different feel and shape in my mouth than the high C does. Now, so an extension, or past that, another step past that, is to try to put the two together. And so again, this is where the first step, where we just focused on the voicing of the low notes, I kind of just let the upper note happen by changing my fingering. I'll remind us that we have to blow our air. So what's going to make the low note come out is air. And if you don't have enough air, you may overblow the low note and get an octave higher, or even some other note. So on these large leaps, I would take them 2 notes at a time. And then let's jump down to the bottom of the piece. The second is where the low D sharp to C happens. And so those are less large, the leaps, and what's happening is you're going up to a C natural all throughout, but you're having a chromatic scale that's going up and then down. And so again, I'm focusing on the voicing of the low notes. And let's give us a tip on that. So low notes can be assisted on the saxophone by, let's say, a D. Well, let's start with a C. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, low C key. Keep this F key up, the right hand index finger, first finger, and at the same time you're blowing the air. So it's already, the air is in, your tongue is on the reed, and now you're going to release the tongue to make the sound happen. This finger is up and you pop it down. So, and that simultaneous pop, the same time you release your air, lets the low notes come out a little bit easier. So you might go ahead and try that on your low D sharp if it's necessary. Let me start the beat before it's an E natural. Another thing, in this case, they're going by so quickly, so I might not be able to do that so much. In this case, though, I'll also say that another thing that's going through my mind is that you want your fingers to be relatively light and nimble as you're playing, but that sort of popping action that helps my low notes come out with my first right hand index finger, I sometimes intentionally play a little bit harder with my hands when I'm going from the high note to get a little bit of that pop to come out. I don't want to say to play hard or to grab the instrument so much, but I can't be, there's a point of being too gentle and the notes don't want to speak because they are wide enough intervallically. So for instance, the last little section, whoopsie, had a little bit of things inside my reed here from talking so much. So, might as well just talk about that too. How do we put this, the reed on the mouthpiece? And generally speaking, there's a line on your mouthpiece. And so I take that line and I put the top of my ligature around where that line is. And I want my reed to be lined up with the top of the mouthpiece. So when I look at the mouthpiece, or the reed, say like this, I want it to be pretty much flush with the top. It's okay if I see a little bit of a black line of the top of the mouthpiece, a little bit. And generally speaking, that'll make the reed respond well. So now, so that's essentially what I'm doing there, is just a little harder finger motion. Try to pay attention, a new category of dynamics, try to pay attention to dynamics as best as you can. I think that the faster you get with this piece, the more almost you're going to have to jump to a dynamic. You have room to get, there's a diminuendo in the fourth line, last bar. And then you're going to get to the piano dynamic. You're going to have to really plan for those and look ahead and think ahead on those. If there's room, if there's time, what I would say, time meaning like if you can make some time as far as phrasing goes. So let's talk about phrasing a little bit. In that last phrase I played, you could kind of slow that down a little bit, and if you want to kind of give a little bit of shape to it. And I'm trying to do that when I can, so I play with a metronome and without a metronome, but if you're not, obviously in the audition you won't be playing with a metronome. Just a subtle kinds of stretching or pushing or pulling of maybe just a few notes can give you a little bit of sense of forward motion and linear phrasing like that. When, in general, I would say that to try to do something like that, think you're always moving forward with your phrase, which means think your air is moving forward. Your air is always what's pushing things forward. Okay, so we talked about hand position, we talked about dynamics, we talked about, I'm not in order here, we talked about articulation, we talked about breathing. We can talk about auditions. So I would say when you walk into the audition room, have your tempo in your mind and maybe pull it back ever so slightly from a sort of breakneck tempo that you know you could do when you're at home, but pull it back ever so slightly to be a little bit more safe when you go into your audition, because more than likely most people have a little bit of nerves and they may think they're going at a certain tempo, and once they get the piece going, boom, they start to rush a little bit. So have your comfortable tempo, maybe even your metronome before you walk out into the room. You have it outside the room and just click the metronome a little bit to hear what your tempo should be. Not only, by the way, your metronome like clicking, but also think of a phrase of music. So I like to think of that second to last line. If I can think of what that line is going to sound like, that lets me play the first bar a little bit more securely, because the first bar, because we have repeated B's in the middle of the saxophone, might be super easy for you compared to that last line. So if I start the first bar a little too fast, but then I get to that last line, it might be a little bit tricky. That's risky by the time we get down there. Another thing about, second thing about auditions, so think about your tempo, take it a little bit slower than your adrenaline might want you to. I like to take 2 deep breaths before I walk into the audition room. So again, from my lower portion of my torso, let it out. And you can do this in the audition, outside the audition room as well. So you don't have to do it in the audition room. Second one, Try to calm yourself a little bit, relax, let it out. And as I'm letting all that breath out, now I take a good breath to start my phrases. We didn't talk about breathing points in the etudes. And so what I'll say is that I tried to breathe at the rest marks or after an eighth note. But if you need a breath sooner than that, maybe just take a little bit of a space. So let's put one in, say for instance, let's put in, I'll put it in at the end of the fourth bar. So. See how I'm taking it? I just take a little bit of a retard, maybe a very mini decrescendo, quick breath, not a full tank of breath on those short ones, just a little one. And that way you can plan your breaths if you need to take one sooner than when the rests are noted in the piece. Okay, I wish you all good luck, and please stay in touch. I'd love to hear how you all did, and good luck. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.